Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. We turn our attention now to the commodities side of things, focusing on agri-commodities. I'm being joined on the program by Okpeyemi Oguntade, who is a senior financial analyst with Financial Derivatives Company. Okpeyemi, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good morning.
So, yes, it's great to have you on the show. And, you know, this program is today's own. Is particularly interesting because today we get to find out the decisions by the Monetary Policy Committee that's been meeting since yesterday. So I'm guessing that's one of the burning issues that, of course, the commodities are actually looking at.
Yeah, definitely. The Monetary Policy Committee, like you mentioned, is meeting today, or the decision is going to be out today, and we know that they have a lot to chew on, considering the events that have happened between the last MPC meeting and this meeting. We know that they were officially in a recession. We also know that the S&P downgraded Nigeria's credit rating. We also know that inflation has been taking upwards, although we've seen month-on-month inflation slow. Inflation at 17.6% is still pretty high for Nigeria. And so today, we're looking out for what the CBN governor is going to decide on respect to monetary policy rates and other key monetary policy instruments in the market.
But give us a sense of where the market is. You know, we came out from the holiday, and we're into a week where we're seeing a lot of activities in the in the economy. Where are the commodities at the moment? Are we still seeing an increase in sourcing for FX to import goods?
Yes, definitely. Specifically for domestic commodity prices are still high. But even looking at the manufacturing side, we've seen that a lot of manufacturers have been complaining about access to forex. Even though the CBN has given a directive of 60% allocation to manufacturing, to manufacturers, it's a question of 60% of what volume. I mean, if it's 60% of just $100 million, that isn't enough to meet the demand of the manufacturing sector. So definitely, we're still seeing prices increasing on that level. We've even seen a couple of manufacturers reduce production, like I rightly mentioned in the report. AG Leventis has reduced monthly bread production by about 67%, from 1.5 million a month to 400,000. And then if we're looking at goods produced domestically, we know that agriculture is one of those sectors that is susceptible to weather change. And we've seen that in recent days we've had a lot of rainfall and flooding in some particular areas, and this is affecting the ability of farmers to harvest products in those regions. Specifically, we've seen that plantain has been affected, and more recently we've seen cassava as well has been affected. And going forward, if this flooding leads to sustained damage on these commodities, then we would likely see an upward tick in prices.
Give or take. At the end of today, we'll definitely know what that decision is. That will be from the Monetary Policy Committee.
Yes.
What if they do nothing? How would the market react?
If the MPC chooses to do nothing, I mean, at the end of the day, at 14% is still pretty high, and we've seen that the fiscal authorities are beckoning for a decline in rates because of their domestic
and even the manufacturers supported that call.
Exactly, the manufacturers in terms of borrowing costs. So at 14%, it's still pretty high. How will the market react? On the domestic front, it's likely to be a bit of an uproar, but looking at it from the international communities, obviously at a higher rate of 14%, given that there are real returns are already negative, living at 14% is good news, but for domestic investors and domestic stakeholders, at 14% is still high. But that's the worst that could happen, maintaining it, but increasing it is it's very unlikely.
What about if they decide to drop it?
If they decide to drop it, then that's certainly good news for domestic stakeholders, for the government for one. It reduces their borrowing, reduces their debt servicing, and as well as the manufacturers. And then even looking at it from the consumer's perspective, we would see that there will be an increase in the marginal propensity to consume and a decline in the marginal propensity to save. So in that regard, reducing the interest rates would spur economic activity via consumer spending.
Okay, for the inelastic versus the elastic goods that we actually track on the program, could you just give us a likely scenario of what will play out in those segments?
Okay, so if we see if the MPC decides to reduce the monetary policy rates with a lower interest rates and, like I rightly mentioned, a higher increasing the marginal propensity to consume, for inelastic commodities, we'll definitely see an increase in consumption in that area, because at the end of the day, they are they are commodities that are that demand remains stable despite changes in prices. So if there's a little change or the significant change in price levels, demand for those commodities remain fairly stable. So if we are saying that marginal propensity to consume is increasing, then we'll definitely see demand for inelastic commodities increasing. But for elastic commodities, it depends on the change in the price level. So if we're saying that price levels for those commodities are increasing, supposing they are one of those commodities that are affected by the heavy rainfall as well as harvest, then we wouldn't necessarily see an increase in consumption.
Yeah, because those ones
regard.
aren't, they don't need forex to do anything, you know, because we have palm oil, semolina, maize and tomatoes under that particular category. But for the inelastic, yeah, so fingers crossed on that one.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Opeyemi, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning and, of course, sharing your thoughts with us on the state of the commodities market. So we'll just quickly take a look at some of the oil and gas stocks we track here on the program, and just before we take, you know, some excerpts from the last meeting held by the Monetary Policy Committee, when the CBN governor read out some of the key considerations of the committee just before they made the decision to increase monetary policy rate by 14%.